Chapter 21 What do you want? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Captain Darren. On the warship deck, the North Sea Navy soldiers on duty saw Darren's appearance and immediately raised their hands and saluted solemnly. Thanks everyone. Darren smiled, everyone shook their heads and immediately returned to their posts. The treatment of the Beihai Navy is much higher than that of navies of the same level in other sea areas, not to mention that in addition to basic military pay, they also have fixed paid holidays and are equipped with the most sophisticated munitions and weapons. Military training at the highest level, everyone in the Beihai Navy knows in their hearts that everything they have depends on their admiral. Darren slowly walked into the cabin of the warship, walked down the narrow stairs, and came to the bottom of the cabin. At the bottom of the cabin, a temporary prison has been set up. The commander of Germa 66, Mtlnovel, is imprisoned here. Seeing the arrival of that damn navy, Mtlnovel, whose whole body was restrained by steel and even his mouth was sealed, struggled wildly, his eyes were bloodshot and he made an inarticulate sound. It is conceivable that if looks could kill, his violent and resentful look at this moment would be enough to kill Darren 100 times. Darren waved casually, the steel block blocking Mtlnovel's mouth flew out of thin air. The former immediately roared angrily. You damn navy brat! How dare you imprison me? You, the Admiral of the North Sea, have come to an end. The Kingdom of Germa is a member of the world government. You are dead. His words stopped suddenly and his pupils shrank. A sharp steel bar suddenly twisted out of the cell, piercing the air and hovering steadily between his eyebrows. In the reflection of Mtlnovel's pupils, the tip of the steel bar reflected an icy cold light under the light of the shaking torch, like a poisonous snake that chooses people to eat. Have you said enough? Darren smiled. Mtlnovel gritted his teeth. It seems enough is enough. Darren was very satisfied with his reaction. He hooked his fingers and the snake-like steel bars slowly closed. Mtlnovel, you are right. The Kingdom of Germa is a member of the world government. According to the discipline of the Navy, this action will indeed cause me a lot of trouble. Darren took out a cigar, put it in his mouth and lit it. But you forgot one thing. He looked at the overlord of Beihai who was as miserable as a dead dog in front of him with a half-smile. You cannot represent the Kingdom of Germa. Hearing Darren's words, Mtlnovel's heart skipped a beat, and he said inwardly. What do you mean? I am the head of the Mtlnovel family and the king of the Germa kingdom. Why can't I represent the Germa kingdom? No, Darren sneered, you still don't understand what I mean. He slowly exhaled a puff of smoke. This time, I seem to have killed a lot of Germa 66 troops, but you and I both know that they are just clone soldiers. As long as you are given enough time and funds, you can create them again in a short time. In the final analysis, clone soldiers are not human beings, they are just weapons. And most importantly, the world government doesn't care about the life and death of the participating countries, the 5 old stars don't care, and the Tianlong people don't care even more. What they care about is whether members of the franchised countries can regularly turn over the heavenly gold they need. As long as the Germa kingdom can pay the heavenly gold on time, the big shots don't care whether the person sitting on the throne is you, Mtlnovel. Mtlnovel's face suddenly turned pale. Well, it seems you are starting to understand what I mean. Darren raised his hand, the steel cage that imprisoned Mtlnovel suddenly spread out like flowers blooming. At the same time, the twisted metal also intertwined and gathered behind Darren to form a steel chair. Mtlnovel, who had regained his freedom, did not attack Darren angrily at this time. Instead, he stood there with a livid face. He knew very well that without his combat uniform, he could not be this man's opponent. Darren sat slowly on the steel chair, smoking a cigar and smiling. I believe that the other nobles of the Germa kingdom will be interested in the position of the king, and they should also hope that you die here and never show up again, don't they? Mtlnovel was silent, his expression extremely ugly. He knew Darren was right, the Kingdom of Germa has a long history. In addition to the Mtlnovel family, there are also other noble families, large and small. After he left the research team and returned to Germa, he used high-tech weapons to forcefully take over the authority of the Germa kingdom. Needless to say, it was bloody. In the process, he also suppressed other nobles of the Germa kingdom and carried out a wave of purges, but he couldn't kill all these nobles. It is conceivable that those guys should really want to die in the hands of this navy. Don't you dare kill me. Vinsmoke Gaji said hoarsely. Darren laughed. I admit this. After all, you are the king of a franchising country, and I am just a mere naval colonel. It's just that I can hand you over to the world government. As a scientist who has powerful scientific research technology and has worked with Vegapunk on the MADS team, I believe the government will be very satisfied with my move. Vinsmoke Gaji's expression changed drastically. What on earth do you know? He managed to escape from the pursuit of world government agents and avoid falling into the hands of the government and becoming a research tool in their hands, but how on earth did the Navy brat in front of me know about such a secret event? Darren smiled and said. What do I know? You don't have to worry about it. You just need to know one thing. By cooperating with me, you can continue to be your king and commander in peace. Maybe when I am in a better mood, I can help you fulfill your ambition to dominate the North Sea. Or trying to resist me. I will hand you over to the world government, and then support another nobleman in Germa to be the king. As long as the amount of heavenly gold in the Germa kingdom increases by 20%, I believe that the government will not hold me accountable, but will also maybe you can give me a public reward. After the words fell, Vinsmoke Gaji fell into a long silence, and his expression became uncertain. Darren was not in a hurry, just minding his own business and smoking a cigar. He knew this guy's character very well: desire for power, vanity, and arrogance. Do you fight to the death for your own face, or do you lose your freedom and power? Darren trusts Vinsmoke Gaji to make the right choice. Half a minute later, Vinsmoke Gaji raised his head, his eyes filled with bloodshot eyes, and hissed. What do you want? Chapter 22 Protecting the Celestial Dragons. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. The next day, a piece of news came from the Kingdom of Germa, a member country of the world government. Yesterday, Germa 66 and the North Sea Navy fleet completed a public military exercise in the waters near the Kingdom of Yadis in the North Sea. During this exercise, both sides demonstrated strong military combat capabilities. King of the Kingdom of Germa and Commander-in-Chief of Germa 66, Vinsmoke Gaji, expressed his cooperation with Captain Darren, Admiral of the North Sea Navy, and promised to sign a long-term friendly cooperation agreement to jointly maintain the security, peace, prosperity and stability of the North Sea. In the office of the base director of Branch 321, Guillaume and Cake looked at the latest newspaper in their hands, dumbfounded. How can this be? Especially when the newspaper report was accompanied by a photo of Darren and Vinsmoke Gaji standing under a seagull flag and shaking hands. They couldn't believe their eyes. They were fighting to death the day before and almost wiped out Germa 66. Didn't they become friendly and cooperative just one day later? Looking at the familiar, kind and enthusiastic smiles on the faces of Darren and Vinsmoke Gaji in the group photo, others would have thought they were long-lost brothers. This is just like a dream. How is this impossible? Mr. Vinsmoke Gaji is a sensible person. After my patient explanation and advice, he quickly understood the position of our North Sea Navy and the Navy's maintenance of justice and peace. Determination. Darren glanced at the shocked Guillaume too with a smile, and slowly lit a cigar. And he also realized his mistake in starting the war and decided to correct it. Isn't this a very reasonable thing? Gaji nodded in realization. Well, that does make sense. What a piece of shit. He gritted his teeth. How could the cruel, domineering, unruly character and ambition of Vinsmoke Gaji be influenced by Darren's mere words? You are a devil fruit user with the ability to control metal. You are not a person with the ability to inspire fruits. Darren, what exactly did you do? Did you threaten him? Guillaume gritted his teeth with disbelief. I was discovered by you. Darren raised his hands with a "I was discovered by you" expression. He smiled. Actually, I didn't do anything. As I told the Warring States General, I just made him an offer that he couldn't refuse. It's just that I didn't expect that Vinsmoke Gaji would be so sensible. Guillaume and Cake, They looked at Darren's smiling expression and knew that it was unlikely that they would ask anything from him, although I don't know what method this guy used to make Vinsmoke Gaji surrender, but the final result was like this, which was pretty perfect. They stopped this war. Hundreds of thousands of people in the Kingdom of Yadis were not involved in the war. The Kingdom of Germa gave up its pursuit of the North Sea Navy. Guion received several banners sent by the Yadis royal family. There were a few more boxes of fine wine and good cigarettes in Jiaji's mansion. Everything seems to be developing in a beautiful and happy direction. What a ghost. Guion looked at Darren's confident smile that showed him being carefree and in control of the situation. He felt indignant and scratching his head. Intimidation and inducement, deception to gain money, violence and bloodshed, deception from superiors to subordinates. They are obviously extremely bad things, words that have nothing to do with the justice she believes in, but in the hands of Darren, a bastard, they have become the best means to successfully govern Beihai. This was incompatible with all the education she had received in the past. It simply subverted her outlook on life. Buru bulu, buru bulu. At this time, the call of the military telephone bug suddenly sounded. Darren picked up the phone bug and connected the communication. I'm Darren. The hearty laughter of Admiral Sengoku of the Navy headquarters came from the phone bug. Ha 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 ha, Darren, you brat, you are truly a subordinate that I rely on. You handled this matter very beautifully. Guion and Kaki both rolled their eyes, their heads covered with black lines. They clearly remembered how the Warring States General was furious at the phone bug yesterday. All glory goes to justice, all thanks to the guidance of the Warring States General. Darren said humbly. Warring States smiled with satisfaction. I was indeed right about the person. Now it seems that I made the right decision to send those two little guys Guion and Cake to Beihai. Those two little guys are really a headache. Kaji is lazy every day and always wants to steal my cigars. But what about Guion? She looks too much like her sister, and her ideas are too naive. Listening to Sengoku's complaints, Darren glanced at Guion and Cake, whose faces were gradually turning dark, and a strange look appeared on his face. In short, those two little guys are still very immature. If you have time, show them more. Warring States had not yet realized the seriousness of the matter, and became more and more excited as he spoke. Ahem. Sensing that Guion's eyes were getting colder and colder, and his body began to exude a chilling murderous intent, Cake couldn't help but cough twice. Warring States period. The military phone bug fell silent. General of the Warring States period, I heard that you are very dissatisfied with me. Guion said to the phone bug expressionlessly. Warring States period. Hey, hey, hey. Why can't I hear clearly? Hey, the signal doesn't seem to be very good. I can't hear clearly. Darren, you brat, did you hear what I just said? Take good care of Guion and Cake, I know. They are the future of the Navy and the hope of justice. Hey, hey, hey. The signal, why, isn't connected. Brew. The phone bug fell asleep. Communication is interrupted. Guion, addition, Darren. The three of them looked at each other. The flying squirrel, who had been standing nearby without speaking, covered his forehead with pain on his face. This acting is too poor. But within a minute, the military phone bug started ringing again. Darren got on the line again. Warring States General. Well, Darren, I almost forgot to mention that I have a very important mission. Sengua acted as if nothing had happened just now, with a serious tone. General of the Warring States period, please tell me. Darren said. Warring States said in a deep voice. Bondi Waldo attacked an official ship of the world government a few days ago. The World Noble Draconian Shield Saint on board the official ship was shipwrecked and floated to Badia Island in the North Sea. The headquarters has received the order from the government, and I am on my way to Beihai now. Darren frowned upon hearing this. He remembered the news he had read in the newspaper 2 days ago. The great pirate world destroyer Bondi Waldo sank the official ship of the world government. The world's nobles, the Dracos, were furious and offered a high reward of 200 million baileys. Well, the German pirates may become the government's biggest threat. Sengoku General, what do I need to do? Hunt down Bundy Waldo, the destroyer of worlds. Darren exhaled a dragon-like smoke from his mouth and narrowed his eyes. Warring States shook his head and said, "No, although your strength is good, it is still far behind that guy Bundy Waldo. It is my mission to defeat Bundy Waldo. And your mission is to set off immediately to Beihai Island to protect Hilda's saint. The CP department has sent personnel to the North Sea to escort them, but before they arrive at Beihai Island, the government needs the Navy to protect the personal safety of Hilda's saint. Ask for everything, thank you very much." Chapter 23. He is indeed a genius. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The sky is blue, the sea is blue, and the white clouds are floating. The huge warship sailed at a steady speed on the endless blue sea, dragging a long white trail from its tail. In the dark cabin, Darren sat cross-legged on the deck alone, his eyes closed. The light of the oil lamp cast a vague shadow on the cabin wall. 3 metal balls with smooth surfaces floated in midair, moving centripetally around his body. If anyone were here, they would probably be surprised, because these 3 metal balls flying and moving around the naval colonel, even during the movement, the relative distance between them has always remained absolutely consistent. This requires extremely high levels of control. Time passes minute by minute. With the gentle movement of Darren's fingers, the 3 metal balls continue to change shapes like liquids, sometimes elongating and extending into sharp spikes, twisting and wriggling like sinister iron ropes, and sometimes spreading out like solid steel. Shield. At some point, Darren slowly opened his eyes. The 3 metal spheres immediately gathered together, and finally changed shape into a silver metal wristband, solidifying on the Navy colonel's right wrist. He exhaled softly, a satisfied smile twitching at the corner of his mouth. Physical fitness, 60.451. Strength, 55.890. Speed, 58.048. Fruit, 71.871. Sure enough, real actual combat and fighting can force yourself to grow faster. Darren used his insight talent to sense his physical condition and couldn't help but say something with emotion. In the past few months, his cultivation progress has basically slowed down a lot, and even his speed and fruit ability have almost come to a standstill, although as he continued to increase his training intensity, various physical data were still slowly improving, but the speed of improvement was no longer satisfactory. However, after the battle with Germa 66, Darren's physique and strength increased by more than 1 point. If it is training, it will take at least a month to achieve the same effect. It's a pity that Germa 66 was too weak and couldn't really get me into the state. Darren smiled and lit a cigar. Germa 66 and Vinsmoke Gaji are actually not weak, but their own abilities are too restrained by Germa's technological weapons. There is no doubt that if it were not for his own appearance, with the military strength of Vinsmoke Gaji and Germa 66, it would not be a big problem to kill the kings of the 4 countries in the North Sea and even dominate the North Sea. I really missed the time when I fought with that madman Sakaski. Darren's eyes were filled with emotion. Before Sakaski left Beihai and went to the headquarters for training, he would often train and compete with the former without using their devil fruit abilities. Of course, the discussion between the 2 of them was fatal in the eyes of others. After all, that guy Sakaski never holds back. If you are not careful, you may be killed and it will tragically become an accident. During that period, although he would be seriously injured almost every day, Darren was intoxicated by the hearty fighting and the state of constantly forcing himself to break through the limits in the crisis of life and death. That was also the period when his strength made the fastest leap. Unfortunately, that is all in the past. After training in the officer training camp of the headquarters, and under the guidance of former Navy Admiral Zifa Blackarm, Sakaski is now estimated to have mastered hockey. The distance between me and him has been stretched infinitely. After all, Teacher Kaido said, hockey is the most powerful ability in this ocean. With this thought in mind, Darren slowly stood up. He was in no hurry. The 3rd officer training camp is about to start, and if there is no accident, I have already obtained a spot. Although his talent is far inferior to monsters like Sakaski and Porosalino, Darren believes that with his ability, he can definitely win a place in the Navy. Before that, he must build up the North Sea Fleet. Build this powerful fleet that will be equipped with Germa technology into a military force that belongs only to you and only obeys your orders. A firm light flashed in Darren's deep eyes. He walked out of the cabin and opened the door. As the sun shines down, a Navy soldier is on patrol outside the cabin, performing routine maintenance on guns and artillery. On the spacious deck, Cake and Guillaume were practicing in a sweaty manner. The former was carrying a huge barbell weighing 1 ton, gnashing his teeth and doing a handstand and pushing up with a ferocious face. The latter held a long sword in his hand, with a serious look on his face, practicing his swordsmanship in a measured and orderly manner. The sharp blade cut the air, making bursts of sharp whistling sounds. "Are they too having a seizure?" Darren looked at this scene with confusion and asked the flying squirrel walking over. The flying squirrel rubbed its temples helplessly. The Germa 66 incident was quite irritating to them, especially Jiaji. He practiced like crazy after he came back. Darren couldn't help laughing when he thought of the miserable sight of Jiaji being stepped on the face by Vinsmoke Gaji and then kicked out. Boom. At this time, a huge water column tens of meters high suddenly exploded from one side of the warship. The stormy waves surged up, and the entire warship suddenly shook. What happened? Is it an enemy attack? No. It's the Neptune type. The faces of the Navy officers on the deck changed slightly, and they acted quickly, pulling out their sabers, raising their spears, and adjusting the cannons on the warship. A huge shadow slowly emerged from the splashing sea water and was projected in front of everyone, almost covering the entire warship. The scorching sun above the head seemed to disappear, replaced by a huge monster 60 or 70 meters high. It has jet-black scales and gills, making it look like a giant eel. Lantern-sized pupils looked down at the Navy on the deck, slowly opening a bloody mouth filled with sharp teeth. Small Neptune type. Darren looked at the strange fish in front of him with great interest. At this time, Vegapunk had not yet developed a method of loading sea stones on the bottom of warships to allow the Navy to survive the windless zone. In other words, Neptune-like creatures can still sense the aura of warships at this time. The flying squirrel next to him subconsciously stretched out his hand and grasped the handle of the saber at his waist, and was about to take action. Darren held his shoulders and shook his head. The flying squirrel was stunned when he heard a strange cry coming from the deck. "Ha ha 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 ha. Just the right time. Let's use this little reptile like you to verify the results of this genius training." The moment the arrogant laughter broke out, Jiaji's figure stepped on the railing of the warship and shot up like a cannonball. Roar. A touch of human anger flashed in the blood-red eyes of the Neptune creature, as if it was angered by the arrogance of the ant in front of it, and it suddenly let out a deafening roar. The majestic sound suddenly fell, causing many sailors on the deck to stagger. The Neptune creature opened its bloody mouth full of sharp teeth and swallowed the Jiaji who was leaping high in the air. Boom. Add one punch. Ripples of air waves visible to the naked eye spread out. The Neptune's eyes froze, and his expression became confused. Crackling, under Jiaji's punch, dense cracks appeared on its teeth, and then they shattered. Neptune type. Hot tears brewed in its eyes, at this time. Kang. The buzzing sound of a famous sword being unsheathed suddenly exploded. The golden famous sword tore through the air, and a golden sword light roared out through the air and flashed in the void. Laugh. A long and thin bloodstain slowly appeared on the neck of the poor Neptune creature, cut it in two. Then, boom. The huge head of the Neptune species separated from its body, and then fell to the sea, setting off turbulent waves again. The blood that kept pouring out turned the sea surface red. On deck, Jiaji landed firmly on the ground and put on a pose that he thought was handsome. Guillaume sheathed his sword with an indifferent expression, his cloak flying freely behind him. The other marines stared at Guillaume and Cake, who had easily defeated the giant Neptune beast. They were silent for a second and then cheered with joy. Some people even threw out fishing nets quickly, preparing for additional meals. He is indeed a genius of this department, a candidate for the future general. Darren looked at this scene and murmured to himself with emotion. Through the actions of the two of them, Darren could tell at a glance that their strength had clearly improved a lot compared to when they first came to Beihai. Jiaji's strength, speed and physical skills have increased by at least 30%. As for Guillaume, he even understood the flying slash and was able to slash out the sword light, stepping into the realm of swordsman in one fell swoop. It's only been a few days. This terrifying talent, even if it is not as good as monsters like Sakaski and Porcelino, is not far behind. Ha 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 ha. Darren, did you see that? Jiaji walked over with a stern expression on his face. raised his hands and flexed his arms, showing off his biceps. For such a big Neptune, I could smash all his teeth with just one punch. How can you? Boom. At this moment, as if attracted by the blood of the Neptune type, huge waves exploded on the sea again, one end, both ends. 3 heads, a total of 8 Neptune-like creatures with a height of more than 100 meters emerged from the undulating sea surface with their heads raised and roaring. They echoed each other and made a roar that shook the world. As the huge body twisted and rolled, a stormy wave arose on the sea surface, rushing towards the warship. The small warship swayed and trembled in front of the 8-headed and larger Sea King class. Darren waved, the metal wrist guard on the arms suddenly fell off, and then twisted and stretched like a living creature into a sharp spear, which suddenly shot through the air. Sharp explosions continued to explode, and under the force of the terrifying magnetic field, wherever the metal spear passed, white ripples bloomed in the surrounding void. The speed climbed to the extreme in an instant. No one can see its trajectory clearly. Everyone on the deck only felt a blur in front of their eyes, as if something was repeatedly passing back and forth in the void, like a silver phantom. The 8 roaring Neptune-like creatures all froze, laugh. Densely packed small blood holes constantly exploded on the surface of their bodies, spraying out high-pressure blood flow like a sieve. Boom. The behemoths collapsed one after another, causing water jets to reach the sky. Darren recalled the metal spear, condensed it into a wrist guard again, and put it on casually. Behind him was a scene of 8 lifeless Neptunes falling into the sea. He turned to look at the stunned Jiaji and said, "Major Jiaji, what did you want to say just now?" The corners of Jiaji's mouth twitched and he smiled. "I said you can do better than me." Darren glanced at him, patted his shoulder, and looked into the distance. The outline of an island gradually emerged on the distant sea. "Get ready, we are about to land on the island." The corner of his mouth curled up into a sarcastic arc that looked like a smile but not a smile. "Our mission this time is to protect the great, sacred and noble Tianlong people. Ask for everything and be grateful." Chapter 24 Arrival. You are listening at novelfull.audio. North Sea, Beihai Island. The warship slowly sailed into the port, the anchor was lowered, and the naval members of North Sea Branch 321 headed by Darren slowly walked down from the board. As soon as he set foot on the land of Beihai Island, Darren had a look of surprise on his face. "It seems different from the Beihai Island I remember." Beihai Island is one of the transportation hubs of several well-known routes in the North Sea. Although its trade throughput is far less than that of some of the commercially prosperous islands in the Great Channel, it is still among the best in the North Sea. Many merchant ships and trading caravans will pass through Beihai Island for supplies, which will support the economic development of the island. However, where wealth flows, there will naturally be dirty deeds. This is common sense in the world, precisely because of the wealth, prosperity and convenient transportation of Beihai Island. This place has naturally become a place for fishing for oil and water and hiding evil, mafia, underground forces, illegal transactions, and even pirate robberies have become the norm here. In order to balance the balance of power on Beihai Island, Darren had spent a lot of effort and energy before. Even so, the Beihai Island in Darren's impression is still a prosperous and chaotic place, but the scene he saw before him was somewhat beyond his expectation. The once crowded and oil-stained island port has been given a new look, decorated with colorful flowers. The street looks exceptionally neat and tidy, with no garbage piled up at all. The street stalls and shops that were originally scattered everywhere on both sides of the street are now even more neat and orderly. The old buildings have been painted with new paint, and the houses are painted with white walls and blue roofs, which look quite impressive. In front of the gate entering the town, a brand new arch was temporarily built, which was 10 meters high, with the colorful words "Welcome to Lord Hilda's Saint" hanging on it. Because the Tianlong people were shipwrecked and drifted to Beihai Island, the mayor of this island immediately issued a decree to rectify the city appearance, and spent a large amount of tax money to renovate some dilapidated buildings. The flying squirrel walked up to Darren and explained in a low voice. As for the color of this house, it is said that the city government wanted to imitate the decorative style of the Holy Land Marie Joya, so that the world's nobles can feel at home here. Guion and Kaki on the side were shocked when they heard this. Darren couldn't help but smile. It seems that no matter where in the world, there is such a thing as image engineering, but this is normal. the Tianlong people are self-proclaimed gods in this sea, possessing supreme power. For a small place like Beihai, there are very few opportunities for the local governor to see the true appearance of the world's nobles on weekdays. Now it happens that a celestial dragon who encountered an accident came to the area under his jurisdiction. Of course, the mayor must perform well. Even if he strives for a good impression, maybe the world's nobles will be happy later and let him go with just a casual word. Reach the pinnacle of life. Interesting. Darren smiled and nodded, turned to look at Guillaume and the others, and ordered. You should move in with your troops first, and set up a protective circle around Hilda's Saint's activity area. Pay attention to checking for suspicious characters to ensure that no emergencies occur. Although he is not interested in protecting the pig-like Dracos, he would even like to kill one or two if possible, but since this is an order from the headquarters, Darren will naturally try his best to do it well. After all, judging from the current situation, this operational mission is likely to determine his political future in the Navy. If something happened to the Tianlong people under their protection, it is estimated that even the Warring States period would not be able to protect themselves. Darren didn't want to leave the Navy, there was no future as a pirate, and he didn't want to be chased by the Navy all over the sea. Darren thinks that he is not a good person, but he still has a bottom line. In doing things, he can't do anything like becoming a pirate and robbing civilians, not to mention that for a time traveler like him without a golden finger, the Navy, which has a relatively complete training system, is undoubtedly the best choice. The most important thing is that he has invested too much energy and effort in Beihai and cannot just give up. How about you? Guillaume frowned and looked at Darren. Naturally, she had heard about the bad character of that group of celestial dragons, and of course she was not willing to protect them. I have to go to our mayor first to hand over the task. After all, it is the city government's militia that is responsible for the security of the Tianlong people. Darren smiled and said to Guillaume and Kaji, who was probing his head. Now that I'm here, I have to say hello to the local government no matter what. You don't have to worry. The specific security work is mainly carried out by Major Flying Squirrel. You just need to assist. After all, you two just came to Beihai and are not very familiar with the business here. After saying that, Darren moved his eyes towards the flying squirrel. They'll leave it to you. The flying squirrel nodded. Seeing that Darren had given the order directly, Guillaume couldn't force it, so he stayed where he was silently, watching Darren get on a carriage and drive away towards the city hall. Then, let's go this way, Major Guillaume and Major Cake. The flying squirrel greeted with a smile, then turned around and led a group of subordinates to set off at the designated destination. He knew that when Darren went to see the mayor, he was probably going to discuss some matters, and it would be inconvenient to bring Guillaume and Cake with him. Guillaume and Cake looked at each other, hesitated to speak, and finally followed quickly without saying anything. Badia Island, City Hall. Darren walked into the mayor's office, led by a sexy secretary in professional attire. The interior decoration of the office is high-end and magnificent. The smooth marble floor is covered with animal skin carpets, and oil paintings that are obviously valuable are hung on the walls. It's a shame to welcome this distinguished guest. Colonel Darren, please forgive me. Not long after, a flattering laughter sounded. I saw a middle-aged man in a suit trotting in, sweating profusely. He was so fat that his high-end suit was bulging, making him look like a ball. Mayor Hunter is busy with government affairs, so it's only me who has disturbed him. Darren smiled, took the cigar from Mayor Hunter respectfully, and sat down on the soft leather sofa without ceremony. What the hell, Colonel Darren, you also understand. Lord Shield Saint has come to Badia Island, and it's already so busy here. Hunter took out a silk square towel from his pocket and wiped the sweat from his face with a smile on his face. Darren nodded and lit his cigar. It's understandable. After all, this is a rare event that has been rare in decades. I was quite surprised to see the brand new Badia Island when I came here. I think Hilda's Saint will also be satisfied with your arrangements, Mr. Mayor. Hunter was overjoyed when he heard this. That's good, that's good. He had already prepared a document and handed it to Darren with both hands. Colonel Darren, look, this is the situation on Badia Island in the past 6 months. Watching Darren take the file and flip through it casually, Hunter carefully explained. Under your shock, the two major mafia families in Beihai Island have maintained relative restraint in the past 6 months and paid the required taxes on time. Darren glanced at the number at the end of the document and smiled with satisfaction. Well, they are quite peaceful. Hunter nodded and bowed. Of course, who in Beihai dares not to give you face, that he said fearfully, stooping lower, others don't know. As the mayor, how could he, Hunter, not know the methods of the man in front of him? Originally, Beihai Island was full of mafia gangs, fighting against each other. There were constant conflicts due to the competition for territory, and bloodshed was the norm, until a year ago, Darren, the newly appointed base director of Branch 321, came to Beihai Island and used the most powerful and ruthless means to almost uproot the mafia. To this day, Hunter still clearly remembers that hellish scene. The streets were filled with rivers of blood and bodies piled up. The man in front of him stood there covered in blood, and the only two remaining mafia family leaders knelt down in front of him, trembling. From that day on, there are no more gang feuds and turf wars on Beihai Island. The two remaining mafia families have divided their fixed territories from each other, and regularly hand over half of their income as taxes. Because the underworld fight was eliminated, civilians were able to recuperate, the social environment was stable, and the economy of Beihai Island also developed vigorously. Well, I still said the same thing, please tell them for me. Darren slowly exhaled a puff of smoke. As long as they don't take it too far, I'll just turn a blind eye. As long as they behave themselves, money will always be earned. But I don't want to see any civilians bleed to death within my jurisdiction. He smiled. After all, I am a righteous Marine, are you right, Mayor Hunter? Hunter nodded apprehensively and said with an apologetic smile. That's for sure. Who in the North Sea doesn't know that Colonel Darren is a symbol of justice? Chapter 25 The Little Girl Buying Flowers. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The other side, the three flying squirrels were walking along the lively town streets with hundreds of naval soldiers, heading towards the residence of Hilda St. Guillaume looked worried, looking at the back of the flying squirrel walking in front. She felt something was not right, and she always suspected that Darren deliberately separated her and Jiaji to act alone. Sister, you are so beautiful. At this time, a childish voice sounded from the side, interrupting Guillaume's thoughts. Guillaume was stunned and turned around. What came into view was a little girl wearing a simple floral skirt, carrying a backpack behind her, which contained packed red roses. The little girl looked to be only 7 or 8 years old. Her eyes were big and shiny. She bowed politely towards Guillaume and said, "Do you want to buy flowers?" Seeing the cute look of the little girl, Guillaume's heart almost melted. A gentle smile appeared on his face. He squatted down and touched her hair. "Little sister, how much did you spend on this?" As if seeing the long knife hanging on Guillaume's waist, the little girl said timidly. "Sister, can I have one for 200 Baileys?" Guillaume chuckled. "You shouldn't ask me that." Sensing the little girl's eyes, she smiled softly and said, "Don't worry, my sister is in the Navy and will protect you." "Sister, this knife will only be used against bad people." "Little girl, really?" Guillaume nodded and smiled. "Of course, that's what our Navy is supposed to do." She looked at the flowers the little girl was carrying. "Give me one." As he spoke, Guillaume took out 200 belly and put it in the little girl's hand. The little girl raised her head in surprise, then put down her schoolbag a little awkwardly, and started picking carefully with her small face. "Well, this one blooms the most beautifully." She picked out a red rose that was obviously the brightest in bloom, raised her hands in the air, and handed it to Guillaume. Guillaume took it and asked with a smile, "Little sister, why are you selling flowers at such a young age?" The little girl smiled sweetly and replied, "Leah is not young anymore, she can help Daddy." She looked at the roses in her backpack with pride. "This is a flower planted by my father. It is as beautiful as my sister." Guillaume laughed. "So that's it, is Dad a flower farmer? Where's your mother?" "Mom." The little girl's eyes darkened. "Mom is sick, and Dad told me that she went to a place far away for treatment. Guillaume was stunned for a moment, sadness flashed in his eyes, then the little girl turned around again, looked at Jiaji next to her, bowed politely and asked. "Uncle, would you like to buy flowers?" Jiaji's face darkened, the corner of his eye twitched, and he squatted down with a smile that he thought was friendly. "Little sister, I am less than 20 years old, you should call me brother." The little girl opened her eyes wide in surprise, carefully looked at the man wearing a brown hat and chewing a cigarette in front of her, and finally shook her head firmly. "No, uncle, you don't look like a brother, you look like an uncle." Addition, he gritted his teeth and forced a smile with a stiff expression. "Little sister, if you call me brother, I will buy all your flowers." The little girl's eyes lit up, but she soon became entangled again. A pair of white and tender little hands kept stirring in front of her body, her face full of grievance. "Although Leah wanted to sell all the flowers, but Dad told me not to lie." Boom. Jiaji fell to the ground, he got up again and said fiercely. "Damn it! Open your eyes and look, I'm obviously only 19 years old." He screamed frantically. Okay. Seeing the pitiful appearance of the little girl who was so frightened that she was about to cry, Guillaume kicked Cake out angrily and squatted down to touch the little girl's head. "Although that uncle is a bit uglier, he is still a good man. Don't be afraid." The little girl blinked her big eyes and nodded blankly. Immediately, she spread out the 200 belly that she earned from selling flowers in Guillaume in her hands, and counted them awkwardly. Then she took out 40 berry and put it in her left pocket, and put the remaining 160 berry in her right pocket. Seeing this, Guillaume asked curiously. "Why did you separate the money?" That the little girl said seriously. "Dad said that we should hand over part of our income so that those with weapons will not come to trouble us." Guillaume's face changed slightly, but at this time, a man ran over anxiously, took the little girl's hand, and bowed to Guillaume with some fear. "I'm very, very sorry, Lord Marine, Leah is ignorant and spoke nonsense." After saying this, he picked up his daughter and ran away. "Goodbye, big sister." "Goodbye, uncle." The little girl in her father's arms smiled and waved her little hand towards Guillaume and Cake. "Damn it! I told you that I am a brother, not an uncle." Jiaji said bitterly. Guillaume looked at the father and daughter walking away, but he seemed to realize something. "Hand over part of your income, people who hold weapons, taxes." She frowned, walked forward quickly, and stopped the flying squirrel who was commanding his subordinates to deploy tasks not far away. "Major Flying Squirrel, tell me, is that guy Darren doing something shady again?" Guillaume looked serious. The flying squirrel looked at Guillaume with a serious face in front of him and said with a headache. "Major Guillaume, Commander Darren, as the highest officer of the entire Beihai Navy, naturally has things he has to deal with. As his adjutants, our first responsibility is to carry out the orders he issued. Our most important task at the moment is to carry out the security work of Shield Saint." Guillaume shook his head stubbornly and said. "No, I want to know what Darren did. Now that the order from the headquarters has been issued, MaleProtagonist must have communicated with the governor of Beihai Island. There is no need for Darren to go to the handover in person. Since the task of protecting Shield Saint is so important, and Darren is the first person in charge of the operation, it is even more important that he should not leave." She gritted her teeth and asked. "Darren, is he going to collect taxes from those mafia families with the mayor?" That the flying squirrel was stunned for a moment, feeling a little surprised. Although Guillaume's thinking is very naive many times, she is indeed very smart and she actually guessed Darren's purpose. "I knew it." Guillaume clenched his fists fiercely. From the flying squirrel's reaction, she already got a definite answer. "How can you do this? Although the mafia forces are not as harmful to civilians as pirates, their existence will also cause civilians to be suppressed and exploited." Guillaume asked angrily. "Forget it, Darren, that depraved, corrupt bastard is beyond redemption. But Major Flying Squirrel, how can you be like him and collude with the mafia family? We are a righteous navy, and our responsibility is to protect civilians, not to oppress and exploit them." that she had wanted to question Darren a long time ago, but the sudden war started by Germa 66 interrupted her. The flying squirrel looked at the anger and determination in Guillaume's eyes, and suddenly let out a long sigh. What an admirable belief. It's a pity that in a place like Beihai, pure justice is the most useless thing. Major Guillaume, do you see this street? That he did not answer directly, but pointed to the street in front of him. Can you please tell me what you saw? Guillaume was stunned for a moment and looked around. There are many shops on both sides of the street, displaying a dazzling array of products. There is a constant flow of people. Young parents are playing with their children, and there is laughter and laughter everywhere. A scene of peace and tranquility. Peace. For some reason, Guillaume's voice became lower. Yes, the flying squirrel shook his head. But you don't know that a year ago, this street was a notorious lawless street on Beihai Island. This place was once filled with liars, gangsters, fraudsters, and murderers, filled with darkness and chaos that a genius like you who was born in Mtlnovel could never imagine. Guillaume opened her mouth, but before she could say anything, the flying squirrel pointed to a building not far away. That's a hospital. That place was originally a shelter for refugees and homeless people. He pointed in the distance in the direction of the port where they landed. The port where we docked the warships turned out to be a smelly ditch filled with corpses. The road we walked on was a smelly garbage station a year ago. Seeing the faces of Guillaume and Kaki in front of him gradually changing, the flying squirrel let out a long breath. Beihai Island was one of the most chaotic shipping routes in the North Sea. Pirates plundered without restraint, and dozens of mafia families, large and small, ran rampant here. Gunshots ring out here almost every day. The crime rate on the entire island exceeds 30%. More than half of the children have joined the ranks of pirates, liars, gangsters and gamblers for various reasons before they reach adulthood. The island of Beihai, which is bustling with trade, is to some extent a breeding ground for evil. How is this possible? Guillaume and Kaki murmured with pale faces. They looked at the prosperous commercial and trade island in front of them, and they couldn't relate to the dirty and chaotic picture described by the flying squirrel. But in the past many years, hasn't the Beihai Navy sent troops to suppress it? Guillaume suddenly gritted his teeth and said. Send troops? Of course there will be. A mocking smile appeared on the corner of the flying squirrel's mouth. When Major General Sakaski was in office, he led troops to attack pirates and mafia more than once, killing them in rivers of blood and leaving almost no one alive. Of course, this process also resulted in the casualties of many civilians and officials, and also triggered a lot of political pressure, which ultimately led to him being deployed to the headquarters. But, that's at least effective, right? Guillaume said again. Effect? No. The situation on Beihai Island has become even worse. The flying squirrel looked quite complicated. This is impossible. Guillaume and Kaki retorted in unison. Now that Sakaski has sent troops to attack, it can have a deterrent effect no matter what. How could the situation in Beihai get any worse? They couldn't believe it. It's really hard to believe, and if I hadn't experienced it myself, I probably wouldn't believe it, but it is what it is. The flying squirrel sighed. Because there is no way to kill all the pirates and mafia families, at least in the North Sea. Less than half a year after Major General Sakaski sent out troops, a large number of gangsters, lawless elements, criminals, swindlers, pirates, and mafia members, once again poured into this prosperous trade island like locusts. This place has once again turned into a chaotic and lawless place. And the truth is, no one can solve these problems. Major General Porcelino's indulgent policy is ineffective, and Major General Sakaski's iron-blooded policy is also ineffective. Until Darren was promoted to the base director of the 321st branch a year ago, Flying Squirrel said calmly, and when he mentioned that name, his eyes gradually revealed deep admiration. He led the navy to suppress the rampant pirates and mafia families in this place, leaving only 2 mafia families, and divided them into distinct territories. He once told me, pirates, mafia, these things cannot be eradicated in any era. The key to governance is control, at least in the North Sea. Having retained two mafia families that were relatively easy to control, Colonel Darren let them go completely, allowing them to maintain a balance of hostility and unify the island's underground forces. So the situation finally stabilized. For their own interests and fear of Colonel Darren's bloody purge, the two mafia families cooperated peacefully. There are no more gang fights, civilians can recuperate, Beihai Island's economy and trade have achieved long-term development, and the face of the city has undergone earth-shaking changes. The crime rate, which originally exceeded 30%, dropped to less than 5%. Chapter 26: The Navy's Biggest Problem. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The flying squirrel's words were like invisible sledgehammers, constantly hitting the hearts of Guillaume and Cake, shaking their hearts and making their faces gradually turn pale. They never thought that the island in front of them, with dense crowds and prosperous trade, was once the sinful city and lawless place described by Flying Squirrel. What they even failed to understand was that all the peace and prosperity they saw in front of them actually appeared because Darren single-handedly supported two major mafia families. Heavy impacts continue to challenge all the concepts and education they have received in this department. But, doesn't the income of the mafia family come from squeezing civilians? Guillaume murmured with a pale face, a look of confusion in his eyes. Yes, this is indeed the case. The Flying Squirrel frankly admitted. But compared to the possibility of encountering shootings every day, my family and friends were killed due to gang fights, my children gradually learned bad things because of this harsh living environment, and finally joined gangs or went to sea to become pirates. Compared with being in fear day and night, not even daring to do business, unemployed, bankrupt, civilians are more willing to pay a certain amount of protection fees to the mafia family in exchange for a relatively peaceful and stable living environment. This is reality. Guillaume took 2 steps back with weak legs, shook his head and said. But, if our navy takes action and eradicates all the mafia families, wouldn't the civilians not even have to pay protection fees? Wouldn't their standard of living be better? Why do we have to keep 2 mafia families? The Flying Squirrel sighed again, he couldn't count how many times he sighed. That's the genius of Colonel Darren. He said slowly. If all the mafia families are eradicated, the final result will be the same as that of Major General Sakaski. In less than half a year or even a few months, countless mafiosi, large and small, will pop up again in this place. Family. In order to seize territory, they will fight more fiercely, and in the end only civilians will be injured. Leave 2 mafia families and divide their territory well. On the one hand, it will make them fearful and hostile to each other, and they will not dare to deceive our navy. On the other hand, it will also facilitate deterrence and management. The 2 remaining mafia families will, for their own benefit, protect their respective territories and fight against pirates and other underground forces who come to rob, thereby indirectly achieving the effect of protecting civilians. After all, for them, after their power has stabilized, the better and richer the lives of civilians are, the higher the protection fees they can charge. And with Colonel Darren's intimidation, they don't dare to go too far. After all, they know deeply that everything they have was given to them by Colonel Darren. Guillaume heard it as if he was struck by lightning. Use the power of the mafia and pirates to protect civilians. She had never heard of such a thing. But, if our navy can obviously do more. No, the Flying Squirrel shook his head, his tone also filled with weakness. The navy can't really do much. Because our navy is a military force under the world government on this sea, and due to geographical factors, our navy only has law enforcement rights in various places, but no governance rights, let alone residency rights. That is to say, no matter what happens, whether it's the plunder of pirates, the vendetta of gangs, the melee of the mafia, our navy can often only investigate after the fact, or can only solve temporary needs. The navy is not allowed to station troops in independent countries and islands, so there is no way to permanently protect local civilians. This is the navy's biggest problem. By supporting the mafia, Colonel Darren is able to achieve the effects of governance and protection to a certain extent in the local area, thereby protecting the lives of civilians. This is a road that has never been traveled before, and at least it seems to be working. And the most important thing is that through this method, Colonel Darren can easily grasp the situation in various places, and can also focus most of his energy on dealing with the really dangerous pirates. Major Guillaume, Major Khaki, do you understand now? That the flying squirrel looked directly at the two people from Guillaume with a solemn tone. If the Navy has the right to station troops, then naturally it does not need to use such complicated methods and can directly station troops locally for protection, but the system does not allow it. After all, if the Navy has the right to station troops everywhere, it is not an independent military organization, but a warlord. This is something that the world government and major kingdoms are not allowed to see. I know that both of you have a noble and firm belief in justice. For this, both Colonel Darren and I have great respect. Yes, you heard it right. I am very familiar with Colonel Darren. Although he seems bohemian on the surface, it can be seen that he is not very repulsive to you. Seeing the somewhat disbelieving expressions on Guillaume's two faces, he added and explained. Otherwise, it would be impossible for you to discover these things. Please believe me, with Colonel Darren's ability and means, if he wants to hide it, you won't be able to find anything at all. Guillaume and Cake were silent after hearing this. The flying squirrel said slowly. Both of you, I know that you too have some opinions on the style of our North Sea Navy, but this is the North Sea after all, and our methods will not work at all in this sea area. In terms of results, this is the best era the North Sea has ever seen. His face was filled with proud pride. Seeing islands and towns moving towards peace and prosperity under the jurisdiction of the Navy is the greatest pride in itself. It is also the best reward for my military uniform. Even in this process, the methods used are not so glorious. You too, it is not convenient for Colonel Darren to tell you these things, and he doesn't bother to explain them to you. The flying squirrel continued. For him, other people's looks and comments are not important at all. He has his own set of rules. But what I want to say is that Colonel Darren is actually not the scumbag you two thought. Guillaume Bito bit his red lips and whispered. But no matter what, it is always wrong to collect money from civilians from the mafia. The flying squirrel smiled. It is indeed bad to collect money, but the Beihai Navy is indeed short of money. And most importantly, Colonel Darren has a principle. He blinked. After receiving the money, he will do the work. The views of this book are less idealistic and more realistic than the previous one, asking for all support, praise, and gratitude. Chapter 27 I Want Her. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Guillaume followed the Marines a little absent-mindedly, his black eyes filled with confusion. After learning the truth about Darren's management of the North Sea from the flying squirrel, she always had a dreamlike feeling about the prosperity and excitement in front of her. In a daze, she suddenly remembered what the Warring States General and sister he once said to her. Guillaume, although we as the Navy are responsible for justice, sometimes justice is quite powerless on this sea. But why? Isn't our Navy the most powerful military organization in the world? It is true, but this sea is too vast, and the light of the seagull flag of justice cannot shine into all the dark, dirty, and gloomy corners. You may not understand this now. This is a blessing, but it is also a misfortune. Guillaume became depressed, and Cake next to him also looked weak, and even forgot to care for the people. Soon they came to a magnificent mansion. The mansion was obviously newly built, with a blue roof and white walls, and exquisite flower gardens. A security line has been set up outside the courtyard by poorly equipped militiamen, numbering probably several hundred people. Damn waste. You can't handle such a thing. They heard a violent yell coming from the mansion, accompanied by the sound of objects being thrown. Soon, they saw the frightened militiamen kneeling on the ground starting from the front row, their faces gradually turning pale, as a figure wearing white silk clothes and a glass cover on his head walked out of the mansion commandingly. The wave of kneeling was like ripples, spreading towards the outside. Shield Saint was angry. He never expected that this time he would meet that lunatic. Bundy Waldo while he was happily going on a tour. What made him even more unexpected was that a mere pariah would dare to attack the official ship of the world government and attack his own ship. Most of the CP members who accompanied him died in that horrific apocalyptic disaster, and then the storm at sea washed him to this island. This was the most embarrassing moment for him since he was born. Damn it. The blonde-haired shield saint gritted his teeth and cursed angrily. He glanced at the two CP members in black suits behind him. These were his last two escorts. Get away. Don't block my way. In a displeased mood, he kicked down the militiaman who was kneeling on the ground in front of him. He looked up and saw a navy man in a snow-white cloak walking towards him. Lord Hilda's Saint, I am Flying Squirrel, the Deputy Base Commander of Beihai Branch 321. I am here to ensure your personal safety under the orders of the Navy headquarters. The Flying Squirrel walked over, raised his hand to salute a military salute, and said expressionlessly. Hilda's Saint glanced at him sideways. His attitude was extremely arrogant, and he sneered disdainfully. Hey, my cute Navy puppy is here. Why is he a deputy base commander and your boss? The Flying Squirrel clenched his fist, then quickly unclenched it, and said in a deep voice. The base commander is handing over security tasks to the city government. Next, your safety will be taken care of by our Beihai Navy until the official ship of the CP department arrives. TCH. I don't expect you guys to be able to protect us just by looking after homes and nursing homes. Anyway, the CP department will be here in an hour or two, so let's make do with it. Hilda's Saint said casually, not caring about the ugly face of the Flying Squirrel, and turned to look elsewhere. The moment he saw Guillaume, his eyes suddenly lit up. The greed and wretchedness in his eyes made Guillaume frown, feeling uncomfortable all over, and subconsciously took a step back. TSK, 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 I didn't expect there to be such beauties in the Navy. Hilda's Saint looked up and down at Guillaume, his eyes filled with aggression, and he clicked his tongue. The Flying Squirrel's face changed slightly. Jiaji's pupils shrank and he couldn't help but take a step forward. They had heard about the bad habits of the Tenryu people. If he really targeted Guillaume. It's a pity that you are too old. I almost, fell in love with you and became my 18th wife. Ha 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 ha. Hilda's Saint winked and smiled lewdly at Guillaume. Let's go out and have some fun. I've been bored to death by recuperating in this crappy place these days. Under the ugly faces of all the Navy, Hilda's Saint walked out of the mansion in a swagger. This damn bastard, how dares to take advantage of you, Jiaji whispered angrily. Obviously I am qualified to be your husband. Guillaume rolled his eyes and loosened his grip on the handle of the knife, feeling inexplicably relieved in his heart. The world's nobles, the Tianlongs, possess supreme power. If they are really targeted, they may bring a lot of trouble and pressure to Sister He and the others. Let's go. At this time, the Flying Squirrel said something gloomily. Major Guillaume, stay away from him. Guillaume nodded, hoping in his heart not to cause any complications, so everyone led the Navy soldiers to quickly follow the footsteps of the Tianlong man. A huge group of people, headed by the Draconian Shield Saint, were walking on the commercial street of Badia Island. Wherever he passed, the originally lively street suddenly became silent. The civilians knelt down and worshipped on the ground in large numbers, spreading out like waves, looking frightened and not daring to get close. The world government has ruled the world like a behemoth for 800 years. Facing the God who holds the greatest power in the world, the hearts of the civilians are filled with a deep awe. But at this moment, a childish voice suddenly sounded, so harsh in this deathly silent street where you could hear a pin drop. Guillaume's expression changed drastically. Gargoyle and Flying Squirrel's pupils constricted. They opened their eyes and trembled unconsciously. A little girl with black hair and a floral skirt carried a large bouquet of flowers behind her. There was a sweet smile on her face, and she looked innocently at the man wearing a glass mask in front of her, holding a delicate rose high in her young hands. Uncle, do you want to buy flowers? Time seems to have stopped at this moment. Under the desperate eyes of everyone in Guillaume, they saw Hilda's Saint's ugly, pockmarked face, and little by little, an excited, flushed smile gradually emerged. His eyes were filled with strong greed and possessiveness. There is an indescribable excitement in that kind of perverted obsession. It seems like a naughty child saw a fun toy. Guillaume and Kaki immediately tensed up, gritting their teeth, because they saw the ugly celestial dragon, slowly stretched out his fat fingers covered with gemstone rings, pointed at the innocent little girl in front of him, and said with a ferocious smile. I want her. Chapter 28 Meeting Lord Shield Saint. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I want her. Hilda Saint's excited and ferocious laughter echoed in the dead silence of the street. Guillaume and Cake's faces suddenly turned pale. At this moment, a man covered in dirt hurriedly pushed through the crowd of kneeling people, stumbled out, and knelt in front of Hilda Saint with a bang. He grabbed his daughter, guarded her tightly behind him, and trembled with a pale face. Sir, I'm sorry, my daughter is blocking your way. I will take her away right now. Seeing the panic on her father's face, the little girl named Leah finally realized that she had made a mistake. Her little face turned pale, and her small hands tightly grabbed the corners of her father's clothes. In the way? No, she's not in the way. Hilda Saint chuckled strangely, his morbid eyes not moving away from the little girl's body. This is your daughter, right? Well, that's great. From today on, your daughter will have the greatest luck in her life and become the 18th wife of my great Hilda Saint. Ha 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 ha. As soon as these words came out, the middle-aged man's legs softened and his eyes widened. He kowtowed vigorously, his eyes red, and said, Please, Lord Shield Saint, don't take my daughter away. She is my last relative in this world. Bang, 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 the sound of the man's forehead hitting the floor was so harsh, and the force was so deep that you could even see a shallow blood mark left on the ground. When the little girl behind him saw this scene, she was so frightened that she couldn't make a sound, and big tears fell from her eyes. Hilda Saint snorted in dissatisfaction, raised his foot and stepped heavily on the back of the man's head, saying ferociously, What's wrong? You still don't want to, right? I have fallen in love with your daughter, which is the greatest honor in your life as a father and daughter. You should be grateful. Do you know how many people in this sea hope to marry their daughter to the great, sacred, and noble celestial dragon? Your daughter will become my wife, and you will have no worries about food and clothing for the rest of your life, and you will live a high-class life. That the man's face was stepped on by the celestial dragon, causing blood stains and distortion. He roared and struggled to squeeze out a smile. Lord Shield Saint, I am very grateful for your proposal, but Leah is still young, and I just want to live peacefully with her. Hilda Street became furious and kicked the man hard in the face. The man's body rolled several meters away, his face suddenly swollen, and blood gurgled from his mouth. Dad! The little girl finally cried loudly at this time. Guillaume's face was livid and stiff, and he subconsciously held the handle of the knife at his waist. Judgy gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. The surrounding civilians were kneeling there, trembling, not daring to be angry or speak out, feeling sad in their hearts. The celestial dragons are descendants of 19 of the 20 kings who formed the world government 800 years ago. They claim to be descendants of the Creator and enjoy all privileges. They have supreme power, and any action that dares to provoke or confront the celestial dragons will usher in crazy revenge from the world government. Once offended, the Admiral or CP0 must step in for protection. That little girl was attracted by the Tianlong people, which was not a good thing. The paranoid, perverted, and twisted characters of the celestial dragons are no secret in this sea, and they themselves do not shy away from it. She is a wife in name, but in fact she is just a plaything. The celestial dragons, who regard other people as pariahs and ants, do not care about the life or death of their playthings. Under normal circumstances, once one becomes the plaything of a celestial dragon, death becomes the greatest luxury. The little girl would become Shield Saint's 18th wife, so where were his 17th previous wives? The answer is self-evident. Ha 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 ha, come with me back to the Holy Land, Mary Joa. Without even looking at the man who was vomiting blood and falling to the ground, Hilda Saint laughed and walked towards the little girl, about to reach out his hand. No, you are a bad person. I don't want to go with you. With tears in her eyes, the little girl bit Hilda Saint's hand hard and struggled out of his hand. Hilda Saint suddenly screamed in pain, but his eyes became more and more excited. That's right, that's the look. It's a really nice look. He licked the corners of his mouth, looked at the little girl in front of him who was trying to be strong, and smiled with satisfaction. The look on his face that was obviously full of fear but still stubbornly resisting, was really exciting. It's a magical experience. I guess I won't get tired of it for a long time. Catch her here, be careful not to hurt her, or I will chop you into pieces and feed them to the dogs. He gave orders to the two CP members behind him with a grin. The CP members did not hesitate and acted quickly, surrounding the little girl step by step. Damn it. No. At this time, the man who fell to the ground finally regained his breath, struggled to get up with blood-red eyes, roared and rushed towards Hilda Saint. One of the CP members stepped forward and punched him hard in the abdomen. The man immediately bent over, his eyes bulging, as if he was suffocating. He slowly slipped to the ground and spit out red blood from his mouth. What a shameless guy. A flash of impatience flashed in Hilda Saint's violent eyes, and he suddenly took out a golden pistol. Damn! Jia Ji cursed lowly and bent his knees slightly. Guillaume pressed the handle of the sword tightly on his waist. Just when the two were about to take action, a figure suddenly appeared in the middle of them like a ghost, holding Cake's shoulder with one hand and Guillaume's sword with the other, and pushed it back forcefully. Cake and Guillaume were stunned, but before they could react, their pupils suddenly shrank, and dense bloodshot eyes oozed from their pupils. Death! You untouchables who don't know how to live or die. Hilda Saint smiled wildly. In the man's desperate eyes, in the heartrending cry of the little girl, the trigger was pulled. Boom! Gunshots fired. The world is deathly silent. Everyone's eyes widened. The CP members were stunned. Hilda Saint was stunned. The man and the little girl were also stunned. A slight buzzing sound, as if something was suppressed to the extreme, came from in front of the man. He knelt there dumbly. Even his breathing stopped. A rapidly rotating bullet was trembling and buzzing in front of his eyebrows. Hover there. As if imprisoned in the void by some strange force. 1 second, 0.2 seconds, 0.3 seconds. Damn it. Who is it? Shield Saint roared in ferocious rage, with veins bulging densely on his forehead. An imposing and terrifying figure slowly walked out of the crowd of Navy soldiers. Short black hair, deep facial features, and facial lines as deep and cold as a cliff. He was unusually tall, almost 3 meters tall. A large snow-white cloak fluttered automatically behind him without any wind. He slowly walked in front of the dull-looking man with blood on his face, raised his hand and picked off the bullet. Hovering in mid-air, turn around, the tall figure enveloped Hilda Saint like a mountain, giving the latter terrifying pressure. The black-haired marine looked down at the celestial dragon in front of him, until the latter finally couldn't suppress the fear in his heart and took half a step back unconsciously. Then he smiled and said, Admiral of the North Sea, the highest commander of the Navy in the North Sea, Captain Darren of the Navy headquarters, I have met Lord Shield Saint. Asking for all support, grateful. Chapter 29 I admire you very much. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Admiral of the North Sea, the highest commander of the Navy in the North Sea, Colonel Darren of the Navy headquarters, met Lord Shield Saint. The Navy captain's loose, relaxed and magnetic voice slowly fell, echoing in the silent streets. The man with blood on his face stared blankly at the tall and majestic figure in front of him, motionless. Guillaume, Cake and others also looked shocked and couldn't help but look at each other. Darren took action to stop the bullet. He stopped the celestial dragon's shooting, but for some reason, both Guillaume and Kaki breathed a sigh of relief in their hearts. Beihai, Admiral Beihai. Hilda Saint was stunned for a moment when he heard this. He was so frightened by the deep aura of the Navy in front of him that his back was sweating, and he said in a ferocious voice, How dare you stop me? He paused and suddenly roared crazily. How dare you stop the celestial dragons? Darren suddenly laughed. His eyes were half squinted, and the corners of his mouth curved like a cunning fox. No, Lord Shield Saint, I have no intention of stopping you. I just simply think. Darren suddenly turned around and kicked out fiercely. The shiny black military boots hit the man's abdomen with great force. The astonishing burst of power prevented the latter from even uttering a cry. Like a kite with a broken string, it drew a blood-colored parabola in mid-air and flew backwards for more than 10 meters. I don't know life or death. Hiss. Everyone present gasped when they saw this. Guillaume and Cake's eyes were filled with bloodshot eyes, and they felt an indescribable anger welling up in their hearts. Finally, they couldn't control their inner emotions. One of them held down the handle of the knife, and the other tensed up, and they were about to take action. Unexpectedly, the next second, the flying squirrel had already stopped in front of them, and whispered coldly. Do you want everyone on this island to die because of your stupidity? That the coldness in the flying squirrel's expression and the severity in these words were like pouring a basin of ice water directly on their heads, sending a bone-chilling chill throughout their bodies. Their bloodshot pupils were trembling, their breathing became heavy, and the tense muscles in their bodies relaxed forcibly. Yes, they get it, if they dare to take action here. Once they cause the displeasure of the celestial dragons, under the latter's madness, I am afraid that the entire Beihai island will usher in the wrath of the celestial dragons. At that time, that man's life would no longer be enough to fill the gap with a mere civilian, but everyone on this island must be buried with them because of their impulsiveness and recklessness. They gritted their teeth so hard that they almost broke them. Hilda's Saint himself looked at the actions of the naval colonel in front of him with an expression of astonishment, and for a moment he was somewhat unpredictable about the latter's thoughts. At this time, Darren took back his feet and said with a smile, "There's no need to dirty Lord Shield Saint's hands when dealing with this kind of untouchable, right?" Hilda's Saint was stunned for a moment, and a proud smile suddenly appeared on his face. "Ha ha ha ha. Very good. He is indeed the watchdog of my Tianlong people, he is very sensible," Darren said with a smile. "It is our Navy's duty to serve the great celestial dragons and the respected world government." Gion and Kaki, who were not far away, heard sparks in their eyes were blood red, and their chests were rising and falling. Darren took a step forward, approached Hilda's Saint, and lowered his voice. "Lord Shield Saint, with your identity and status, there is no need to worry so much with these untouchables. It is simply a waste of time. It's rare for you to come to Beihai. Our Beihai Navy has prepared a small gift for you. Please don't refuse. This is the welcome and enthusiasm of the people of Beihai for the great and holy Lord Hilda's Saint, and it is also a little bit of my personal care." As he spoke, he clapped his hands, and within 10 seconds, Mayor Hunter led a dozen militiamen, carrying extremely heavy boxes, and trotted over with a smile on his face. "Hello Lord Shield Saint." Mayor Hunter nodded and bowed, with a flattering smile on his face. Hilda's Saint didn't look at him, just glanced at Darren with squinted eyes, then took a step forward and casually opened a gap in one of the boxes. A dazzling light of various colors burst out from the gap, which was clearly a large amount of gold and silver treasures. A satisfied smile finally appeared on Hilda's Saint's face. He closed the box, stared at Darren with admiration, laughed and said, "Your name is Darren, right? That's great, I admire you very much. With your talent and ability, a mere admiral of Beihai is simply an underachiever. As a world noble celestial dragon, although he possesses extraordinary power, he is still short of money. The fees and expenses provided by the world government for each noble are indeed huge amounts of wealth that ordinary people cannot imagine, but for the celestial dragons who live a corrupt, decadent and extravagant life, no amount of money is enough." Darren smiled and shook his head. "They are all serving the Navy and justice. No matter what position they are in, they can all use their talents. There is no difference. Although the North Sea is not as exciting as the Great Waterway, Beihai grew up in this sea and has deep feelings for this sea. Lord Hilda's Saint, an official of the world government, arrived at the port 2 minutes ago. For your safety, I suggest you set sail back to the Holy Land as soon as possible." Hilda's Saint nodded when he heard the words. "That's right, the air in this place in Beihai smells of filth and vileness. It's really disgusting." He glanced at the surrounding buildings painted with blue roofs and white walls with disdain, and said dissatisfiedly, "And the style of the building is just a poor imitation." Mayor Hunter next to him had cold sweat on his forehead and said with a sorry smile, "Master Hilda's Saint has taught you the lesson. Once you turn around from a humble position, you should immediately order improvements." He didn't bother to wipe the cold sweat from his forehead, turned around and said eagerly to the militiamen, "Hey, you guys, move quickly and move all the gifts from Lord Shield Saint to the port." Darren then made a gesture of invitation. Then, "Lord Shield Saint, please come this way." Hilda's Saint smiled and just took steps forward, but suddenly thought of something and stopped again. Almost forgot. The expressions of everyone in Gion and Kaki suddenly changed. He glanced greedily at the little girl Leah, whose face was as pale as paper, then turned his head and looked at Darren with a smile. There was actually a unique and profound joking in his smile. Catch my wife and ask her to return to the Holy Land with me. Once we arrive at the Holy Land, we will get married. That the words fell, the smile on Darren's face gradually disappeared. Chapter 30 Survive. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Someone, arrest her. Hilda Saint laughed proudly and gave orders to his 2 CP guards. No, do not want. The little girl had cried so hard that her eyes were swollen. She looked at the 2 men in suits walking towards her step by step and struggled back in fear. However, the 2 CP members stepped forward expressionlessly and grabbed the little girl's hands and shoulders. Their movements were rough and abnormal, ignoring her lifeless cries, and soon left blood marks on the little girl's arms. The other civilians who were kneeling on the ground could not bear to look away, not daring to look at this cruel scene. Guillaume and other Marines stood there with livid faces, the anger in their hearts almost burning their bodies, but their hands and feet seemed to have been filled with cement. They were so heavy that they could not move. Darren took a deep breath. Lord Shield Saint. What's wrong, Governor Darren? Do you have any opinion on my decision? Shield Saint interrupted Darren with a mocking expression, staring at him with a half-smile. Darren's eyes gradually narrowed, but a smile that was even more enthusiastic than before suddenly appeared on his face. Of course not. It is her luck and the glory of the people of Beihai that Sir Hilda Saint can like her. It's just that I'm afraid that your 2 subordinates may hurt your wife, so I want to help you. After saying this, Darren's figure disappeared from the place like a ghost. The next second he appeared in front of the little girl. They didn't see any movement from him, but the 2 CP members felt an invisible force pushing them away. Darren waved casually, and the long knife on the waist of a CP member suddenly flew out and twisted into liquid metal in midair. Most of it quickly solidified into shackles, wrapping around the little girl's hands and feet. The remaining metal condensed into a pair of mouth shackles, sealing the little girl's mouth and stopping her crying. Only a pair of frightened, tearful eyes were left exposed. Darren took a step forward, squatted down, looked at the little girl with hatred, and said expressionlessly, "It is your honor to serve the great Lord Shield Saint." He took the little girl's hand and brought the latter, whose eyes were desperate and dull, to Hilda Saint. Lord Shield Saint, this will at least make your journey a little quieter. Hilda Saint glanced at Darren and suddenly laughed loudly again. Ha 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 ha. Interesting. Interesting. You Marine is so interesting. He looked at Darren with admiration and amusement in his eyes. You are very good, Darren. I will put in a good word for you to those old men in the government. In the eyes of countless civilians with resentment and hatred, Darren bent down slightly and said with a smile, "Thank you, sir." Ha 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 ha. Hilda Saint laughed again. Then let's set off and return. As he finished speaking, a CP member walked over quickly and lay on the ground like a tame and loyal hound. Hilda Saint stepped directly onto his back and left in the direction of the port commandingly. Another CP member also pulled the little girl, who was in a daze, as if she had been frightened and lost her mind, and followed him. No, do not want. At this time, a hoarse voice suddenly sounded. Everyone was stunned. I saw the little girl's father tremblingly getting up from the blood-stained ground, and reaching out his hand in the direction of the Tianlong people in despair, as if trying to catch something, but in the end he couldn't catch anything. Guillaume looked sad and walked over, intending to help him up. Sorry. She whispered. She didn't dare to look at the man's heartbroken eyes. I saw that the team escorting the Tianlong people had boarded the gorgeous official ship, then set sail and quickly disappeared on the sea. A stiff smile suddenly appeared on the man's bloody face. That smile, the hidden sadness, despair, and absurdity, is unbearable to look at. Lia may lead a pretty good life. Guillaume said a comforting word that even she herself didn't believe. You should also live well. Suddenly, the man slammed into the wall of the building. Bang! Blood splattered on Guillaume's face. She felt that her vision became very blurry, as if it was occupied by dazzling red, and everything in her eyes seemed to be upside down, like hell. She vaguely saw the man's blood continuously flowing down the whitewashed walls of the city hall to welcome the Tianlong people, blood red and snow white intertwined into twisted colors in her world. That dull impact echoed over and over again in her mind. buzzing, panic screams, calls for doctors, angry curses, footsteps, broke the dead silence of the street. Hurry and save people. He's still alive. It can still be saved. Guillaume sat there on his knees in a daze, his body weak. In her hand, she held a delicate and blooming rose tightly. The thorns of the rose pricked the flesh and blood of the palm, bleeding out, but she was completely unaware of it. Live well. She suddenly realized that her comforting words were so ridiculous. The little girl's mother has passed away due to illness, and the man's only true love is her. And now she was taken away by the celestial dragons. This man, whose hands were covered in mud, was left alone from this moment on. What reason and courage does he have to live? In a trance, the words she had said to the little girl came back to her mind again. Don't worry, my sister is a Navy and is here to protect you. Of course, this is the Navy's responsibility. Guillaume suddenly trembled all over. She raised her head and stared blankly at the sky. The sky was overcast, very dark, and the light seemed to be blocked by something. Boom. A thunderclap flashed and exploded from the dark clouds. Snowflakes fell gently like goose feathers. It's snowing, it's still midsummer. She murmured dazedly. In the year 1492 of the Hainan calendar, the tropical climate of Badia Island in the North Sea saw the first snow in decades. Snowflakes that were not cold fell on Guillaume's body. She turned her head blankly and looked at the silent back of Admiral Beihai not far away. Her brain seemed to be frozen and she lost all her ability to think. In a trance, she suddenly understood. She finally understood what the Warring States General said. This sea is too vast. It is impossible for the light of the seagull flag of justice to shine into all the dark, dirty and gloomy corners.